Hey everyone, I'm Loui,
And I'm Valerie, and this is Musical Tangents.
where we just talk different things about music.
Welcome.
Did you like music as a child?
Yeah, of course. I mean, how I kind of got into playing music was I begged my mom. Guess I watched a video or saw something on TV of someone playing the violin, and I was begging my mom. I was like, "Mom, I want to take violin lessons, please." There were no violin teachers in my hometown, so instead, she got me a piano teacher, and I started taking piano lessons when I was 5.
That's kind of unusual. They didn't have a violin teacher.
That or my mom was not willing to look hard enough.
Either way, you ended up with piano.
Yeah. And I was I remember going to my first piano lesson and thinking, dang, this isn't what I asked for.
What do you mean? Like,
Like,
why?
I wanted to take violin lessons because I thought it was so cool.
You thought the violin was cool.
Yeah, I was like, I wanted to be that girl that played violin when I was 5. I swear, I was in kindergarten when all this was happening. But
But you ended up with
I got piano
piano.
lessons, and I had an amazing teacher as a kid. I have no regrets now. I really love the piano. Can't say the same for the violin. I love listening to other people play it.
Yeah, I mean, any untrained. Oh my gosh, that brings that that reminds me. I tried to learn violin for a second, just after I grew up. So
Yeah.
when I got into college, I was like, let me try to pick up another instrument. I kind of know how to play guitar, kind of know how to play piano. So I was like, I'll just be mediocre on violin too. Oh my gosh,
can't.
it's hard.
You can't be mediocre on the violin because it's so easy to play in tune. Like, the piano's obviously tuned for you, and the guitar you have frets, so it's relatively easy to play in tune on those
Yeah,
instruments.
no,
But
you're right.
on the violin, no. It requires so much special training to sound good on the violin.
I have a whole new level of appreciation for a good violinist because as soon as I started using a bow and make the
Yeah,
contact, I was
and it
like,
just sounds like,
this sounds like pain.
literally. I work at a music school, and one day they had while I was just doing my front desk part of the job, they had a violin laying around, and no one was there. It was a really quiet afternoon, and I picked it up, and I was like, I'm gonna teach myself how to do this. It was not good. At all. I managed to get out hot cross buns, and that was about it.
I couldn't even get through Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, so there it is. Yeah,
I didn't even attempt that. No, I think I did get the little main tune to Ode to Joy. But that was all. It was all just by ear.
Yeah,
So I have
yeah.
I don't know what key I was playing in or
It's
what.
hard.
Yeah.
String instruments are so hard. I don't know
Yeah.
how some people do it. It's kind of incredible. However, I will say I think it was like an advertisement for one of the master classes, and it was what's his name? A really famous violinist. Um, Itzhak Perman, I think. He one of the clips that they used in the ad was he was basically saying, "I've been playing out of tune every day, every year."
Yeah.
And I was like, that feels, I cannot understand that, but I'm sure a lot of string players probably understand that
I feel
better.
like you'd almost have to have perfect pitch.
Well, even if you do, I mean,
Yeah.
there are so many other variants to it. I feel like that's the interesting part for me now, like going to see different instrumentalists play in a different location. The location plays a part. The atmosphere around the location plays a part. Like
Yeah.
if it's air conditioned or if there's a heat, there are all these different components that we don't necessarily know or we don't
Or
really
even have
care.
control of.
Exactly. And that definitely influences the overall performance,
Yeah.
I think. And that's one of the reasons why some people like I didn't know this. I didn't know this was a concept until like recently, but it made sense. Uh I think it was my mom, for those of the people who are listening to this, my mom is a musician, and she occasionally helps out like different chamber musicians and things like that. I think she was helping out a church put on this chamber music.
Mhm.
They had a string quartet and a piano. So, it's two violins,
Yeah.
viola and cello, and then piano. Piano was out of tune, which,
Oh.
by the way, I feel like it normally is out of tune, no matter unless you have a specific tuner that you bring all the time.
Yeah.
I feel like piano is most likely going to be out of tune. Get this. She was like, the piano is not tuned to 440 hertz. So the
Mhm.
string instruments need to tune down
Mhm.
to match the frequency, or at least get close to what the piano is tuned for. And I think that's kind of interesting to me because that just shows how
How
it,
versatile they have to be.
yes, and how inflexible piano is.
Yeah.
We don't have to carry around the instrument,
Yeah.
and it's really up to, as some people say, it's up to God as
Yeah.
for like what piano we're going to deal with
Yeah. We just kind of
wherever.
have to take whatever we can get sometimes.
And that's the hardest part,
Yeah.
especially if you well, I think most of the musicians care about the performance quality, so that's like the hard part.
Mhm.
uh do you have like the it event that kind of made you, I really want to become a musician?
Mm. Mm.
Like from Justin, because I feel like a lot of people just enjoy music even when
Mhm.
they're growing up. I mean, I think everyone, generally speaking, it's very cliche nowadays for people to say, I grew up where everyone in my family just loved music. And that's
Yeah.
great. I think that's a great thing. But there are some people who really do get driven. They get motivated to become musicians. They want to
Yeah.
take it a step further. Like, do you have an it moment that made you?
I can't like necessarily remember the moment, but it was sometime around like third or fourth grade, somewhere in that age that like I don't know how I found them or like what I was doing, but like I found the Beatles essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Like I had been playing classical music, like not playing, I was a kid. So I was like taking piano lessons
Right.
up to that point. But maybe it was my piano teacher that showed them to me. The memories are all a little bit fucked up. It's been a while. But I just like fell in love with them, and I kind of like I started at the beginning, like their first few albums and like kind of their like when they blew up in 1964 and listening to their music from the early days. And then like as I got older, I started listening to the music. I kind of like feel like I grew up along with them even though I didn't grow up in the 60s and 70s. Um but I guess like specifically Paul McCartney, just the way he kind of approached music,
Yeah.
I just found it so interesting and so captivating. And I went to Amazon and like bought a book of piano arranged Beatles music. Granted, it was arranged horribly, but like as a kid, I didn't care. I just had to get my hands on it and I had to play it, and I just loved it. And ever since then, like I don't know, that kind of grew into finding more artists that I felt like I had some kind of connection with, and I don't know, I just never left that like little obsession of like wanting to know more.
Yeah, the Beatles definitely had a huge impact, and I think, granted, I'm going to say this: I don't listen to their late era of music.
That's my favorite stuff.
You're the the late Beatles.
Yeah. Like Let It Be, Abbey
Oh my
Road.
gosh, is that late? is that a late period for the Beatles?
That was their last album together. Was Let It
Oh,
Be.
okay. In that case, okay, then I guess I haven't really heard their. When's I wanna hold your
That's
hand? Is
early.
that's
That's very
early?
early.
Okay,
That's
okay. I guess it just depends on what kind of album it is. I don't know the history of the
mhm.
Beatles as well as you do, obviously, but I remember the Beatles being accessible. Like,
It was so easy to access because my grandma grew up in the 60s.
yeah,
So of course she had a few of their albums and some
uh,
of their like little memorabilia things, and she remembers watching them on the Ed Sullivan show. So that was also something that like I could connect with her. Like a way for us to have like something in common and something to kind of bond with together. And I mean, the Beatles were it was always easy to find their music,
mhm.
or I it was it in like kind of looking back, maybe it was just the thing that was the most accessible to me.
I think it's just easy to listen to.
That
It's
too.
yeah, I think that's to me is the biggest influence that I have from the Beatles.
Mhm.
Granted, I don't think it's a direct influence to for me because I wasn't a huge fan of the Beatles or I didn't really appreciate their music until I grew up much later.
Mhm.
But when I think about their music, like let's just take Let It Be for example.
Mhm.
It sounds simple, but I was
Mhm.
like the lyrics, the
Mhm.
music, they all flow together so well.
Mhm.
Like I think that's a great example of Paul McCartney just writing a song
Yeah.
in his dreams.
Mhm. He's always talking about he had a dream and then the
And
music
yesterday
just came.
comes
Yeah.
out.
I had a dream and the music just came to me. Oh, that wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah, he just
But
dreams about a tune coming
yeah.
out.
Um but no, he's a musical genius in my opinion.
Well, and what's so funny is, yeah, I think people also now it's kind of a popular understanding, but
Mhm.
we kind of know that the Beatles members did
Mhm.
not really know how to read sheet music. They
Mm.
didn't have a formal education that necessarily taught them all these music
Mhm.
theory concepts, but somehow they wrote all those songs and
Yeah.
I'm like, listen, that's impressive.
Mhm.
You gotta
And
give them
they
some credits.
built a little empire,
Yeah,
a
they did.
huge empire in the
They
music
did.
industry.
And now, one thing that I still don't understand, to be
Mhm.
completely honest, I don't think any of them were really handsome.
I
Maybe,
mean,
maybe that's just me.
I don't know.
Like,
I
okay,
don't know.
young George Harrison,
Okay.
I thought was handsome.
Yeah.
I don't think Paul McCartney or John Lennon were ever really that good
No, I
looking.
don't think any of them were ever like I don't know. Maybe it was just like in the 60s like like no one had seen shag hair yet and they were just like
Oh,
feral.
I think actually that is one of the things. Yeah,
Yeah.
they haven't seen that before. And that was the world before social media or
Mhm.
globalization. So it's much easier to see like why they were so obsessed with a foreign band
Mhm.
becoming big in the United States.
Yeah.
Cuz like they
I mean, they
came
were the first viral boy band. I mean,
yes.
Elvis
Yes.
was definitely the first I like viral pop star,
Yeah, but
I guess.
I
But like
think
they were the first like boy band
and they
to go
were
viral.
I feel like they were one of the non-American
Mhm.
born band
Yeah.
that became viral in the United States. But that's
Mhm.
the interesting part is that they always credit it back to American musicians. Like I
Mhm.
remember who was it? I think it was Rolling Stones. They always credit BB King or all of these
Mhm.
blues artists and I think that's why Rolling Stones got their fame later after
Mhm.
people found out about them. I feel like the Rolling Stones was another big one, but they were
Yeah.
not as big as the Beatles
No, they
at the
were
time, at
at the
least.
time. I mean, they were huge.
The Beatles was just so big.
Yeah.
They were a big band,
Yeah.
and
And and you didn't really see anything like take a hold of teenage girls that much until like One Direction.
yes, yeah, that's
Mhm.
true. That's true. They were just heartthrobs at the time.
Yeah.
But not I don't know if it's for the looks
Are you talking
or
about One Direction or the
no,
Beatles?
no, the Beatles. The
The
Beatles.
Beatles. 'Cause
Listen, One Direction. I think they're just different level of looks from the boy
Oh,
band. So
yeah.
no, but the
Harry Styles is a
Beatles.
cutie. You
But
can't
the
deny it.
Beatles, I feel like, had a phenomenon based on their music. I don't know.
Hmm.
Maybe that's wrong for me to say.
I mean, I don't think they were doing anything. They were doing things differently, but I don't think it was like, I mean, the kind of like 50s rock era kind of
Yeah.
had already passed through. So to me, I mean, maybe it sounded new to their ears, but to me, I don't think it's that crazy astounding. Versus like 10 years later in the 70s when you have like Led Zeppelin and that sound is totally different.
That's true.
So,
Which is also weird because Led Zeppelin, I think the bandmates of Led Zeppelin is like the same age as the Beatles members. I
I
think
have no
they're
idea.
born in the same era. But anyway, I
I have
think
no
that's
idea.
really interesting. The Beatles definitely was one of the most, and they were loved all over the world.
Still are.
Yes,
But yeah,
yes.
something.
But like when back, I'm talking back before we had Apple Music, we had
Yeah.
Spotify, we didn't have streaming services, we didn't have digital distribution of any sort. Everything had to be physical copies, and yet, if I remember correctly, like my grandparents, who are by the way born are either around the time or before Korean War. So that's a long time ago. And they knew who the Beatles were.
Yeah.
I mean I think that's kind of crazy is
And
that
you can still go to Walmart and like find there's like new CDs of their music. Like they're still like making
they're very
vinyl
relevant
and
still.
CD
Yes.
of their music.
Don't know
So
how they do it.
says a
but
lot. I wonder what their residuals are. Like I wonder what Paul McCartney's making off of residuals.
Well, there's a whole
that's not the right
there's
word.
a whole debate though
Really?
because I think I think the Beatles discography was sold to Michael Jackson. I think Michael Jackson
What?
bought it.
I think I know what you're talking
makes
about.
yeah, he makes so much money. I think
Or his family does now.
well, I guess, but like that's my point is
Why
that I
would
think
they
Michael
do
Jackson
that?
Why did they do that?
Yeah.
I think Michael Jackson was just a shrewd businessman. That's what it was. I love
don't know.
Michael Jackson by the way, but
I
it's
just find that so surprising. That's so random.
well, because Paul McCartney and Michael Jackson, for those of you, most of you probably already know this, but Paul McCartney and Michael Jackson worked together for a while.
Yeah.
I mean, they did Say, 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 which was kind of their one big song, and The Girl Is Mine, which is another, but that's a different type of a song, I guess. And they worked together, and I think Michael Jackson essentially convinced Paul McCartney, I can get you more money. And basically bought the whole discography. And I think the whole Beatles profit, essentially, from the music
Yeah.
goes to Michael Jackson's estate. I think Michael Jackson held the copyright, essentially, if that makes sense. So, like, I don't know. Is it morally right or wrong? I have no say so in that. That's between them. I know that Paul McCartney was kind of upset about that last time I heard.
I don't
rightfully
know.
so.
I honestly, I don't keep up with it that much anymore. That was like, I don't know. Just third grade me was captivated by them and their
Beatles.
music, the Beatles in general, and that's what like got me into just like really obsessing over music, which I don't know. I guess it's fitting.
Well, and also, you were learning classical music before then. So you probably felt more connected. They were still alive. Like, Paul McCartney was alive.
He is alive.
Well, he still is alive. There's a whole theory, of course.
Oh,
he was.
okay. Oh, yeah.
You remember that conspiracy theory that Paul McCartney has been dead since like 1969? But
Yeah.
anyway,
No, I don't. I'm
my
not gonna
point to
go
that
into that.
was, I think when you were learning classical music and learning repertoire pieces or practicing old classical music pieces of piano, you didn't know the composers or they were already dead. So it feels less close. If
I
that, I
wouldn't
don't
say they
know.
felt close either. I mean, like as a kid, like old people seem older. Like you know what I mean? Like to me, it felt like it was so long ago. Like wow, the Beatles 100 years ago. I like it was not 100
No,
years, but
but
that's like what it
that's
felt like.
well. I think that's when you were, when we were all kind of
Yeah, but
younger.
now I'm like, oh, like they were like now I'm like, oh, they were really young when they became popular, and like I can't imagine being 22 years old and like all of this fame hitting me and stuff like that.
They were good.
But
What can I say?
yeah,
They were really good when they were young, and
I mean they handled the fame better than I would. I guess. I mean, I wouldn't say they handled it well, but they handled it better than I would.
I can't remember what did they ever get in a scandal?
A lot of scandals, and a lot of scandals over just like stupid things. Like there was one big scandal where like John Lennon, they were in this interview and John Lennon was like, we've become like more famous than God. And like people, that's kind of
Oh,
began the
is that
drop of
John
their
Lennon?
that kind of began the drop of their career. Like people started burning their albums and being like, we can't be Beatles fans, they're Satanists, and stupid stuff
Okay,
like that.
let me ask you this then.
Okay.
As an avid the Beatles fan, who's your favorite member?
Paul McCartney.
Paul McCartney.
Yeah.
Who's your least favorite member?
I don't know if I have a least favorite. I guess John, because he was just a dick. Like he was just like, if you've watched the like Abbey Road documentary on Disney Plus, he was just so difficult to work with.
Has he always been like that? Do you know?
I mean, I don't know him personally, so it's not like I can
Well, yeah,
say.
but like from the interviews and things like that, do you think he was always like that?
I think he was always a little bit pretentious, but I don't know. I feel like in their earlier career they were maybe a little bit more micromanaged, and then their manager died in
So that
1965 or
changed.
66. I
So
don't know the exact
maybe
date.
they were
Yeah.
filtering him out earlier in the career, in
Maybe.
their career, and he never really changed, but more things got out of hand.
I guess.
The
And they
managers
also,
couldn't control him.
yeah. I mean, it was the 60s, and they were experimenting with
The media,
substances, and the media.
Oh yes, yeah, yeah, yeah.
So maybe their perspectives and viewpoints on the world were changing.
See,
Like
that's
you don't have. I mean, you can also be like, you're in a different place. Like their career really spanned the whole decade, and it's not like you can't expect someone to
As a
change. Yeah, or like the band was evolving. Them as humans, like just beings, were evolving. So
Yeah.
their opinions are gonna change. How they view the world is gonna change. Because I mean, they went into it like broke essentially,
that's true.
and then they kind of blew up very quickly.
Mhm.
And so, I mean,
People change.
as people, we were constantly evolving.
Yeah.
So
That's true.
you can't be like that upset with them, you know.
Yeah, and I don't know. I think I like their music, and I don't really know much about their personal lives. Clearly, I didn't even know that they were doing substances and things like that. But
Very much so. It was the 60s.
I was about to say everybody did at the time.
Yeah. And not much has changed since then in the realm of the world.
Yeah, but I don't get into that discussion
Yeah.
ever.
That's not for the podcast.
Well, and I think I don't know. Maybe this could be something that we can talk about later, but
Yeah.
like, does it really matter what the artist's personal lives are for the audience members? Like,
That's that gets into the conversation of removing the artist from the art as well.
Yeah.
Like when an artist does something horrible but people still like their music, or they still like what they're producing.
that's going to be an interesting
it gets
conversation.
it gets very sketchy.
It gets confusing, I think,
And
for a lot of people.
it
The
becomes
line becomes very blurred
Yeah.
very quickly because, like, I think that is what we tend to do We definitely tend to connect the artists' personal lives and what they have done in the past with their current output of their productions. Like whether that be music, actors being in a movie, and things like that. Like, does not really matter. I remember um, my old high school theater director. He used to always tell people, I don't really care what the artists' lives are as long as they do a good job. But at the same time, is it really that easy for us to decide? I don't know. That could be a whole
Yeah.
different conversation.
Yeah, and then it gets into like cancel culture and then there's always the line of like some actor or not actors, some artists can get away with it and some artists can't, and
Can't,
then
right?
it's
Where
very
do
it's
we
just
draw the line?
yeah, it's messy. It's so messy.
Yeah, it's definitely case by case. For me, now, I had a very different route of being where I am today than you did, obviously. I didn't study music in college.
Yeah.
I minored in piano performance and I took it relatively seriously, I guess, but I never really intended to be a musician. I think I had that idea when I was younger, and I originally wanted to be an actor as a kid. Um, I liked being on stage. Being on stage didn't feel like just anxiety driving thing that I have to do. One thing that I do remember is I think the it moment for me though, I can tell this to people, is when I saw Michael Jackson. Kind of going back to
You
Michael
saw Michael
Jackson.
Jackson?
No, I didn't see him.
Oh,
Sorry,
I
sorry.
was like,
Let
what?
let me correct myself. I didn't see him. I watched his documentary.
Oh,
This is
okay.
it. When that came out to the movie theaters and things like that, I remember going to the movies, and that came out in 2009 or 2010. I can't remember. And I was like, how old was I? I was like 13 when I saw it.
Oh wow.
So I
I
was
would have been like 7.
Yeah, I was 12 when Michael Jackson passed away. Like I
Yeah.
actually remember seeing the funeral on TV.
I remember the funeral coming on TV and like my mom being like upset, but not like upset. She was just like, "Oh,
Well,
dang."
everyone was, I think, distraught
Yeah.
because they were expecting him to come back with another tour, and literally like 3 days before the tour began, or a week, I can't remember, he died. And of course, nobody saw it coming. But then once everything was revealed, we were like,
The
oh,
signs were there.
of course. Yeah. So, but I remember seeing him in that documentary preparing, which is, by the way, for those of you who haven't watched it, I strongly encourage you to watch it. It's basically a video clips of him doing rehearsals, and it's edited like because they did multiple rehearsals, and every time he would do something different, whether it be a move or something. And I remember seeing him move and sing and communicate music with the bandmates, which I didn't know he played an instrument. Apparently, he played piano.
I thought that he didn't play any instruments.
He apparently did play piano. He was
Oh.
able to play piano.
Okay.
But whenever he wrote music, he would always just have everything in his head.
Yeah.
So, but I remember getting into his music, getting into his performance style, and I think that changed me. I was like, I like music. I like music a lot more than I thought, because there was another moment that I kind of had that, but it wasn't the same way as Michael Jackson. I remember seeing a production of Carmen as a child. I think I was like 6 years old. So I didn't understand anything that was
Yeah.
happening in Carmen.
6-year-old
which-
at the opera. What the heck?
Well, and not only that, on top of that, Carmen,
Yeah.
which is gruesome. That there's a lot happening in that in that opera. Let me just say that. But it was easy for me to watch because it was not all real people. Let me explain. The production was essentially like life-size dolls, and it was like a puppeteer, but it felt like basically like another person would basically operate the characters, and the guy who did this is the crazy part. A guy did Carmen,
Oh.
and he sang all of her parts in the original range. So like he was like doing all the soprano parts.
That's insane.
Yeah, that was another life-changing moment. So those two like encountering Michael Jackson's music and that opera, I think really kind of made me feel like, oh my gosh, maybe music is something that I could do. And I think that's when I started taking music more seriously. So I'm late, meaning like
I can't say that I don't think there's a right timing, but I do think it's
I
interesting. We
know.
kind of have like a similar way of like getting into it.
yeah,
But I think we took it different directions. Like
Oh, yeah.
when I listened to music or was practicing or playing the piano, it wasn't really for anybody. It was more just it was only ever for my own enjoyment. I was never the kid that was like, I want to be a pop star one day and like would sing for my family. No, that wasn't me. That was not me at all. I would wait and practice when my parents were at work or something like that. Like I didn't want people listening to me because it was the only thing I felt like I really had for myself. And
so it
then
was like a personal diary. It's
Yeah.
like keeping a diary. for you.
Essentially.
Yeah.
And like even like when I go back and play old compositions, I'll be like, oh, I kind of remember the phase of life that I was in when I was like practicing these pieces. But it wasn't until college and I met my studio professor that my kind of idea of how I approach music changed, and how I approach performances, because I hated performing as a kid.
Yeah.
Like the yearly piano recitals, I was always dreading those. And I did like one piano competition and I hated it because I was like, this just isn't fun because I'm not like, this isn't why I'm doing this.
Well, I think it depends on personal temperament. I think some people love competing, and some people. Okay, so correction. Some people love competing without having personal feelings attached to it.
True.
That's a difference. I mean, there's a distinction. You have four. If I break it down very broadly, I feel like there are four types of people. One type of people who get into competition and they will fight. They
Yeah.
will fight you. They will be personally attached to all the results. If they don't place first,
They placed last in their mind.
you gotta get out of that person's presence. You gotta run for your life.
Yeah.
And then there's also people on the opposite end of the spectrum who don't like competition and who are also attached to it, like the results. So they don't enjoy it. They don't enjoy the competing part. And if they get bad results, that makes them feel even worse than they were already. I feel like the middle two is basically people who don't really like competition and they don't attach themselves to the results either. So there's no really reason for them to compete. And the last category is the healthy competition people, I guess, is that they like competing, they like hearing other people, and they don't really attach themselves to the results. They're like, okay, well, I guess I got second, but it's so hard. Unlike sports,
There's not really a
Also-
clear. It's kind of like all just like based. I mean, there are definitely some performances better than others, but it's kind of
isn't it subjective?
it's so subjective. Versus like in a basketball game, it's whoever scored the most goals.
Well,
So it's
yeah.
very clear. I mean,
But-
there are those sketchy things of
I was about to say,
you know, with the
even in
refs,
sports,
it can
people
become subjective.
people become very offended if the referees don't call out the fouls that they think were supposed to be fouls. So there are all these rules that you can come up with as many rules as possible, but it's not going to be possible for any competitions that we know of to not be subjective in a way. I think the only
Yeah.
difference is music, because it's an art form. There's a less way for us to not be subjective. I think I think that's the only difference. And anyway, wait a minute. So when you did competition though,
The one.
the one
Yeah.
competition that you participated, was that like tell me about that. Like how
It
was
wasn't even like you got first, second, third place. I don't know. I don't remember it that well. It was in like late middle school, I think, and my piano teacher just at that time wanted me to do it. Or she kind of just made all of her students participate in it. And I think it was a federation competition. And they don't really like, you're not like really placed.
interesting?
You're just given like a satisfactory and excellence or like stuff like that, like almost like a grade. I was just like, this is kind of stupid. I'm not gonna do this again.
So you never thought about entering a competition ever again after that?
No, because I'm just not competitive either.
Are you not
Like,
well, let's
oh,
see. Are you not competitive, or do you get yourself attached to the results
no, I think
with
I just
being
like, I
competitive?
just don't care. I'm like, okay, someone,
Oh,
I'm
so
like,
you really have no reason for you to necessarily participate in a competition.
yeah, because I'm just like, okay, they won. That's cool. Good for them. I'm happy for them. But like, if I win or lose, like my ego stays the same. Like I don't care.
And I feel like if you are surrounded by other competitors who are overly competitive,
I get
and
annoyed.
yeah,
I'm
and
like, I'm just,
they like bug you a little bit.
they do it. I'm just like, ugh, okay, whatever.
That's the eye roll moment. Yeah,
Yes.
for
Yeah.
sure.
It is. You caught my eye roll.
No, but I think it's interesting. Different people have different ways that they become attached to music, and I think that kind of brings us to the topic of, is music or does music give us some kind of universal experience? So like let's kind of change the topic, because I think we've talked enough about ourselves, and not to brush our egos. That's probably the longest time I'm ever going to talk about myself. Okay, but let's talk about universality or individuality in music. So there are two different thoughts to me. I'm not talking about from the performer's perspective. We're going to go in to this discussion being essentially perceiving music from the audience's perspective.